Yeah, that sucked.
A Florida police officer is off the job after he crashed his patrol car while watching, let's just say, things he definitely should not have been watching at that time. Newly released body cam footage shows the deputy's reaction to the accident, and an internal investigation report shows he came clean before resigning. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 28-year-old Tristan Macomber was a deputy with the Lake County, Florida Sheriff's Office, and he apparently crashed his patrol vehicle into the back of another car that was stopped for a school bus. And after that, what did he do? He subsequently decided to quit instead of being fired. Now you might be saying, wait a second, Jesse, why would he quit? It's probably an accident, right? Why would he quit over this? You see, the fact that he crashed isn't the reason he was the subject of an internal investigation. No, it's because of what he was doing just before the accident. And to talk more about that, I'm going to bring in Alexis Rosenberg, trial attorney, federal litigator, to talk more about this. Thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before I get your reaction to all of this, I want to play a little bit of the body cam video. So the audio doesn't come in until just after Macomber rear-ends the car, but you can tell he has something in his right hand, and that looks like a phone.
Attention, 911 assist is turned off. Therefore, 911 assist call will not be made by sync. Attention, 911 assist is turned off. Therefore, 911 assist call will not be made by sync.
2980 County, 65 Signal 4.
2988.
You can use Creston and County Road 435. I'm going to be involved. There's going to be Signal 16. So, 10-4.
So this accident happened back in November in Sorrento, Florida, around 1:30 in the afternoon. Then Deputy Macomber hit the other car hard enough to deploy his airbag, which of course would leave anybody disoriented. But he gets out of the patrol car and eventually reaches down to pick up, again, his phone from the floorboard.
Gosh darn it. Yeah, that sucked. Yeah, I'm good. Hello, ma'am. Are you okay? I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
My brain's locked up.
Okay.
You good?
I was like, oh my goodness, wait. Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. Do you just want to pull off right
should I
here?
pull for more? Okay.
Just to make sure you're out of the turn lane.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're out of the turn lane.
You could hear Macomber say that his brakes locked up, seemingly blaming that for why he couldn't stop in time. And we don't know if the driver of that car was injured in any way, but she appeared to be conscious, alert when Macomber was talking with her. So, Alexis, let me bring you in here. You know, what's your reaction to that video? First thoughts.
When you first look at the video, you're not really sure what he's grabbing for, the movement. You really have to focus in on the video to see, as you mentioned, that there's a phone that he is grabbing for. So you don't know that he necessarily was doing anything inappropriate.
And we will get into what seemingly really did cause this crash. And oh boy, is it something. But before we get into that, you know, his reaction, disoriented, he's relatively calm considering he knows he's at fault for what just happened though, right?
Well, he knew what he was doing, even though it wasn't at first glance so evident in the video. But he definitely knew, which we later find out, that he was doing something inappropriate. He shouldn't have been doing that. As well as in the video, we can see that he jumped out of the car and it doesn't appear he had his seatbelt even on.
Ah, and yes, we will talk about that a little bit more. So Macomber had radioed into dispatch. An investigator came out to document the scene. According to an internal report, Macomber told officials that he had just finished up a phone call with another deputy when he'd seen the sedan stopped in the road for a school bus on the other side of the street with its lights flashing. He claims the brakes on his patrol car locked up. And Macomber also told officials that the ABS light on his dashboard had been lit up since he had some calibrations done on the speedometer. Here is the problem with that. An investigator looked back at that body cam video that we were just playing you and saw that Macomber was looking at something on his phone when he crashed. So what was he looking at? Well, let's start with this. So we got our hands on the internal report, which details how an investigator followed up with Macomber the day after the crash to ask him about the fact that you could see he was looking at something on his phone. It reads, quote, DS Macomber advised me that he was traveling behind the vehicle and had just finished a phone call with DS Hoffman. He went on to say that he was scrolling through text messages on his phone from a group text with his Sector 3 colleagues just prior to the crash. He stated he was not sending text messages when the crash occurred. After speaking with DS Macomber, I reviewed the videos again. DS Macomber's right hand comes down into view of the body-worn camera, and you can see the screen of the cell phone. On the screen of the phone, you can see that DS Macomber is viewing a picture or a video at the time of the crash, and he was not scrolling through text messages. Upon further review, you can see DS Macomber exit the patrol vehicle at approximately, and it gives the timestamp there, and there is no evidence of him removing his seatbelt. He looks back into his patrol vehicle, and you can see the driver's seatbelt is latched and tied against the seat. It appears that the seatbelt was latched behind his back and not being utilized at the time of the crash. So then, the investigator follows up with Macomber's usual supervisor, who told him there were no videos or photographs in the group chat between him and the other Sector 3 members like Macomber had said. So at this point, Macomber is written up for 3 violations of department policy. One is departure from the truth, another is certain use of electronic handheld devices prohibited, and another is use of safety belt. So the first, departure from the truth, is because he said he was viewing text from the group chat when it was clear he was looking at some sort of image. It wasn't the group chat. And they don't even know what exactly those images or image is as of yet. Now, as we wonder whether or not Mr. Macomber may need a great lawyer, let me tell you about Law&Crime's exclusive personal injury law firm, Morgan & Morgan, our great partner and sponsor. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why? Because they win a lot. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $29 million verdict for a bicyclist in Philadelphia, a $2.7 million verdict for a car accident victim in Florida, and $5.6 million for a car crash victim in Georgia after insurance offered that client $0. So even if you think your case isn't worth millions, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? And Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC-SIDEBAR. Alexis, talk to me about these violations and talk to me about the fact that how many times in your career does one person say something and yet the digital evidence, the body cam, the cell phone, it tells the true story of what's going on?
First, let's just say liar, liar, pants on fire. You would think he would know better. Also, he knows the policies and procedures, and he knows that if there's an accident in a police car, that they are going to go back, do an investigation. They're going to look at body cam. They're going to look at dashboard cam. I just don't even see how he thought he was going to get away with this. But I mean, now that videos are so prevalent and that we have them so many times in court cases and investigations, workers' comp investigations, they're so prevalent, you should just assume they exist, because that is really going to speak volumes. If we didn't have that, nobody probably would have even suspected that this was anything but what he was saying.
Yeah, and talk to me about the violations, because my understanding is even if he hadn't resigned, and we haven't even talked about what was on the phone yet, if he hadn't resigned, just the fact that he wasn't wearing the safety belt, was looking at something on his phone, was not being honest, that would have been grounds for him to be fired, right?
It would, but most police departments have a union, and there is a pretty long and in-depth policy and procedure to enable them to actually be fired. A lot of times we'll hear they're put on administrative leave during an investigation. So a full-on investigation in those processes, his due process he would have a right to. So it wouldn't be simply that they did those violations and then they would turn around and say, fire him the next day. But based on what we know from this video and what has come out, and it does appear that they do have a valid reason for termination.
So now we go back to the investigative report, okay? And it states on November 12th, 2024, DS Macomber was served with his subject officer notification and given a copy of the officer's Bill of Rights. On November 19th, this detective received a copy of the Sector 3 text group messages for the date of the crash. The group's text messages contain no memes or videos, again saying that he wasn't being honest about what he was looking at. On November 20th, 2024, this detective met with DS Macomber at the Office of Professional Standards to complete an interview. DS Macomber was given time to review the case file prior to any questioning. DS Macomber was read his administrative notification and he agreed to tell the truth. Real quick, Alexis, this is all to show that he has his due process rights that are being adhered to, right? You know, he's been given notice, he's been given a copy. That's what this is all about, right?
Correct. They're following the procedure in order to be able to ultimately, if they make a determination, terminate him appropriately.
Got it. Okay. So now it goes on to say, DS Macomber stated that he was on the phone with DS Hoffman prior to the vehicle crash, but he was on his personal phone after that phone call looking at inappropriate pictures. DS Macomber was asked to clarify what he meant by inappropriate pictures, and he stated pornographic material like boobs or whatnot. It actually says that, like boobs or whatnot. DS Macomber stated he was looking at images that contained nudity. Alexis, the cat's out of the bag. This member of law enforcement was allegedly looking at porn when he crashed the car. Does it get any worse than that?
Well, he was specifically looking at boobies while he crashed the car. I mean, there's so many things wrong with this. You know, he, like you mentioned, he doesn't have the seatbelt on. He's looking at porn. He's not paying attention. Ultimately, he hits a car that was stopped for a bus. So we're at a bus stop or in a school zone. You know, he's not following, it appears, like any of the policies that he is mandated to do it, and has no concern for public safety either.
And what's scary is he could have killed someone. He really could have killed someone. We talk about distracted driving all the time. You mentioned to me prior that she could theoretically have a lawsuit against the police department and him, right?
Well, she most likely is going to. Hopefully she wasn't hurt, but I'm assuming because the airbags deployed that there was a decent amount of damage that was done to both of the cars, because the deployment of the airbag does require a certain amount of force. So at a minimum, the repair of the car, more, you know, injuries that she possibly sustained or anybody else that may have been in that car could have sustained, there would be potential lawsuit against the police department.
Now, in his interview, Macomber continued to talk about the ABS and the traction control in the patrol car, reiterating that the lights came on after the speedometer calibrations he had just done. But DS Macomber, quote, stated the information in his report concerning the ABS and traction control lights being on was more of a deflection than a genuine reason for the vehicle crash. DS Macomber stated that he had those lights come on before in his other department-issued vehicles, and there had never been a problem with the brakes before this incident. DS Macomber advised he never tested his brakes prior to the vehicle crash that day, even though he had plenty of time and distance to do so before the vehicle crash. Alexis, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that he decided at this point that he was going to be truthful when he was going down that road of lies. You know, I think that it's possible that there was some sort of talk or agreement that he would resign and admit to his wrongdoings. I just think for him to come clean at this point, there may have been something else going on there.
And Macomber, of course, knew he was being dishonest in his report because he told the investigator, DS Macomber stated that he knew he was looking at inappropriate pictures, which was the leading cause of the crash. And he deliberately left that information out of his report. He stated that it's called lying by omission. And he further said he knows that one all too well. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but my gosh, what are we talking about here? And it says DS Macomber was asked about a meeting with Sergeant Walls and what they discussed. He was explicitly asked if he lied to Sergeant Walls when he said he was looking at text messages in the Sector 3 group chat, and he said, yes, sir. DS Macomber further stated that he knew he was lying to Sergeant Walls during their conversation. DS Macomber was asked about wearing his seatbelt during the vehicle crash, and he stated he did not. He stated he believes it more tactically sound not to be seatbelted while on patrol. He stated that it has been his standard practice to not wear a seatbelt, but he knows he should do so according to policy and state statute. Alexis, by the way, talking about potential charges, could he be fined under Florida law for not wearing a seatbelt?
He could be fined for not wearing a seatbelt. Also, he could be charged with, hindering an investigation because he was lying during an investigation, lying on, the public records under oath. If it was under oath when they were doing this investigation, I'm not quite sure. So there are things that he could possibly be charged with. The likelihood is that he most likely is not going to be charged with them, and it was part of the agreement having to do with him resigning. Now, that being said, in Florida, ultimately, it is the state attorney and not the police that determine whether someone's going to officially be charged with a crime and what that official charge would be. But the likelihood is that this isn't going to go any further. My concern is, though, how many other times has he lied or not followed procedures previous to this incident, because he seems to have a complete disregard. He knows he's been trained on what they are, and he doesn't care. He's pretty much doing whatever he wants to do.
Let's talk about that for a second. Are you saying that in cases of police misconduct, that they're old cases that might not even be related to this, where he testified, where he investigated something, they could be reopened by defense attorneys and say, we can't trust this guy anymore, this whole case is tainted? Is that something that defense attorneys could be looking at right now?
I think that going backwards is probably won't go that open. I don't think it's going to be a basis necessarily to reopen, because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and he's looking at porn while driving, reopening past cases. But I do think that the credibility issue on cases going forward, which he would have to testify on, the court could possibly let it in, because it does go towards honesty and his credibility, and letting that in and saying that what he says and what is contained in previous reports may lack credibility.
Well, in conclusion, the report states DS Macomber admitted to knowingly lying in his original report. He also admitted to lying to Sergeant Walls about the incident. DS Macomber stated he was looking at pornographic material on his personal phone just before the vehicle crash. He further advised that he was not wearing his seatbelt during the vehicle crash, which was his standard practice. And so Macomber was facing termination, instead decided to resign, and he had been on the force since 2021 when the sheriff had welcomed him with a photo on the department's Facebook page. Alexis, thanks so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate your insight. What a case to talk about. This was not one that I was prepared for, but really appreciate your insight as always.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.